The dusty beam from janitor Frank Morrison's flashlight cut through 15 years of abandonment as he walked through the halls of Roosevelt Elementary School one final time. The building, scheduled for demolition in just 2 weeks, had been closed since 2003, but Frank had been hired to do one last cleanup before the wrecking ball arrived. Room 14. B had always been his least favorite. Something about it had felt wrong ever since 1991, when its teacher had vanished without a trace. What Frank discovered hidden behind a loose baseboard in that forgotten classroom would finally answer questions that had haunted a community for a decade and a half. The evidence, preserved by the dry conditions of the abandoned school, would not only solve one of the town's most enduring mysteries, but also expose the truth about what happened to Emily Rodriguez on September 18, 1991. If you're new to our channel, make sure to hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell, because today's case will take you through one of the most shocking discoveries in educational crime history, where a routine cleanup before demolition uncovered secrets that had been hidden in plain sight for 15 years. This is the story of a beloved teacher whose dedication to her students made her a pillar of her community, whose disappearance after a routine faculty meeting baffled investigators in an era before cell phones and digital surveillance, and whose case seemed destined to remain forever unsolved. What happened in those crucial hours between Emily Rodriguez's last confirmed sighting and the discovery of her empty car in the school parking lot? And how did evidence of her fate remain hidden just yards from where hundreds of people had worked and learned for over a decade? The answers will shock you. But first, you need to know exactly who Emily Rodriguez was, because understanding her life and her passion for teaching is the only way to comprehend the magnitude of what was stolen from her students, her family, and her community on that September night in 1991. Emily Rodriguez was the kind of teacher who made learning feel like an adventure, and at 34 years old, she had already spent 12 years transforming the lives of elementary school children with her boundless enthusiasm and genuine care for their success. Standing 5'5" with curly brown hair that she often wore in a cheerful ponytail and warm hazel eyes that sparkled when she talked about her students, Emily had the rare gift of making every child feel special and capable of greatness. At Roosevelt Elementary School in Cedar Falls, Iowa, Emily taught 3rd grade in room 14B, a bright corner classroom that she had decorated with colorful posters, student artwork, and the inspirational quotes that reflected her philosophy of education. Her classroom was more than just a place of learning. It was a sanctuary, where shy children found their voices, where struggling students discovered their strengths, and where every child learned that they were valued and loved. Emily had this incredible ability to see potential in every student, recalls Principal Margaret Thompson, who had hired Emily straight out of college in 1979. She would spend hours after school working with children who needed extra help, and she never made any child feel like they were a burden. Her door was always open, and her heart was always available. Emily's dedication to her students went far beyond the standard curriculum. She organized reading clubs, science fairs, and art exhibitions that gave her students opportunities to shine. She wrote personalized notes to parents celebrating every small victory, and she attended her students' soccer games, dance recitals, and birthday parties whenever she could. For many children, Emily Rodriguez wasn't just their teacher. She was their champion, their cheerleader, and sometimes their most reliable source of encouragement. Miss Rodriguez believed in me when nobody else did, remembers David Chen, who was Emily's student in 1989 and later became a teacher himself, inspired by her example. I was struggling with reading, and my parents were worried I might need to repeat 3rd grade. But Emily stayed after school with me every day for months, using these creative games and activities that made reading fun. By the end of the year, I was reading above grade level. Emily's personal life reflected the same warmth and dedication that she brought to her classroom. She lived in a cozy two-bedroom house on Elm Street, just 6 blocks from Roosevelt Elementary, where she had created a home filled with books, plants, and mementos from her travels during summer breaks. She was unmarried but deeply connected to her family, especially her elderly parents, Maria and Carlos Rodriguez, who lived in nearby Waterloo and were immensely proud of their daughter's career. Emily always said that her students were her children, recalls her sister Carmen Rodriguez Martinez, who lived in Des Moines but visited regularly. She poured all of her maternal instincts into those kids. She knew their birthdays, their favorite subjects, their fears and dreams. She would talk about them constantly. How proud she was of this one's improvement in math, how worried she was about that one's family situation. Emily's daily routine was as structured and reliable as her teaching methods. Every morning at 6:30 a.m., she would arrive at school with a travel mug of coffee and a bag full of materials she had prepared the night before. She would spend the first hour of each day setting up activities, reviewing lesson plans, and often baking cookies or preparing special treats for students who were celebrating birthdays or achievements. Her lunch breaks were rarely spent relaxing. Emily could usually be found in her classroom, tutoring students who needed extra help, preparing bulletin board displays, or grading papers. She was known for the detailed, encouraging comments she wrote on every assignment, often spending her evenings at home crafting personalized feedback that would motivate each child to keep improving. Emily never did anything halfway, explains her teaching partner Linda Wilson, who had the classroom next door to room 14B. Whether she was creating a lesson plan or organizing a field trip, she put her whole heart into it. She would stay up late cutting out paper decorations for classroom displays, and she spent her own money buying supplies and treats for her students. Emily's commitment to education extended beyond her own classroom. She served on the school's curriculum committee, helped organize teacher professional development workshops, and mentored new educators who were just beginning their careers. She was working toward her master's degree in elementary education, taking evening classes at the University of Northern Iowa while maintaining her full teaching load. Her dream was to eventually become a reading specialist, a goal that reflected her belief that literacy was the foundation of all learning. Emily had seen too many children struggle academically because they couldn't read well, and she wanted to develop programs that would identify and help these students before they fell too far behind. Emily had this vision of creating a reading intervention program that would catch kids early, recalls Dr. Patricia Hayes, her professor at UNI. She was passionate about the idea that every child could learn to read if they received the right support and encouragement. Her master's thesis was going to focus on innovative ways to make reading instruction more engaging for struggling learners. Emily's social life centered around her work and her family, but she had developed close friendships with several colleagues at Roosevelt Elementary. She was part of a teacher's book club that met monthly, and she enjoyed weekend trips to antique shops and art fairs with her friends. She was an active member of St. Catherine's Catholic Church, where she volunteered with the Children's Religious Education Program. On September 18, 1991, Emily had planned to attend the monthly faculty meeting after school, then go home to prepare lessons for the following week. She was excited about a new science unit she was planning to introduce to her students, focusing on the changing seasons and designed around hands-on experiments that would make learning memorable and fun. The faculty meeting was scheduled to begin at 4:00 p.m. in the school library, covering routine topics like upcoming parent-teacher conferences, new district policies, and planning for the Halloween carnival that was still 6 weeks away. Emily had prepared notes for the meeting, including suggestions for the carnival and ideas for coordinating activities between grade levels. This routine after-school meeting, something Emily had attended dozens of times before, would be the last normal moment of her life. She had no way of knowing that someone was waiting for her that night, someone who had been planning for the perfect opportunity. And she certainly couldn't have predicted that her disappearance would create a mystery that would haunt Roosevelt Elementary School and the Cedar Falls community for the next 15 years. The question that would torment everyone who knew Emily was devastating in its simplicity. How does a beloved teacher vanish without a trace from the school where she had worked safely for 12 years? The answer lay hidden in the walls of room 14B, waiting 15 years to be discovered by a janitor who was just trying to finish one last job before saying goodbye to a building full of memories. Wednesday, September 18th, 1991, dawned cloudy and cool in Cedar Falls, Iowa, with the first hints of autumn coloring the leaves on the maple trees that lined the streets around Roosevelt Elementary School. The temperature was a comfortable 62 degrees Fahrenheit, perfect weather for the kind of after-school activities that filled Emily Rodriguez's busy schedule. She arrived at school at her usual 6:30 a.m., carrying her travel mug of coffee and a bag full of materials for the day's lessons. Emily seemed particularly excited that Wednesday morning, recalls Linda Wilson, whose classroom was adjacent to Emily's room 14B. She had been working on this new science unit about seasonal changes, and she couldn't wait to try out some hands-on experiments with her third graders. She showed me these leaf collection sheets she had created and talked about taking the kids outside to observe the trees around the school. Emily's third-grade class that day proceeded normally, filled with the kind of engaging activities that had made her a favorite among students and parents alike. The children worked on math problems involving autumn-themed word problems, practiced reading with partners, and began the science unit that Emily had been so enthusiastic about. Several students later remembered that Miss Rodriguez had seemed especially happy that day, praising their work and promising exciting activities for the rest of the week. At 3:15 p.m., when the school day ended and students were dismissed to buses and waiting parents, Emily remained in room 14B to prepare for the 4:00 p.m. faculty meeting. She spent the time organizing papers, updating her gradebook, and reviewing the notes she had prepared for the meeting. The custodial staff noted that her classroom light was on and that she appeared to be working at her desk as usual. The faculty meeting began promptly at 4:00 p.m. in the Roosevelt Elementary Library, attended by all 22 teachers and staff members. Principal Margaret Thompson led the discussion, covering routine, administrative matters, upcoming events, and policy changes from the district office. Emily participated actively in the meeting, contributing ideas for the Halloween carnival and volunteering to coordinate a reading incentive program. Emily was completely normal during the meeting, Principal Thompson recalls, her voice still heavy with emotion 30 years later. She took notes, asked questions, and even made a joke about how much candy would be consumed at the Halloween carnival. There was nothing whatsoever that suggested anything was wrong or that she was worried about anything. The meeting concluded at approximately 5:30 p.m., later than usual due to an extended discussion about new state testing requirements. As teachers gathered their belongings and prepared to leave, Emily mentioned to several colleagues that she planned to stay a bit longer to finish preparing materials for Thursday's lessons. This was typical behavior for Emily, who often remained at school well into the evening working on classroom projects. Emily said she wanted to cut out some paper leaves for a bulletin board display, recalls fourth-grade teacher Patricia Martinez. She seemed excited about this autumn theme she was developing. I offered to stay and help her, but she said it wouldn't take long and that I should go home to my family. Security cameras were not installed at Roosevelt Elementary in 1991, so there is no visual record of Emily's activities after the faculty meeting ended. However, the school's evening custodian, Robert Chen, saw Emily's car still parked in the teacher parking lot when he arrived for his 6:00 p.m. shift. The lights were on in room 14B, indicating that Emily was still working in her classroom. At approximately 7:15 p.m., Custodian Chen knocked on the door of room 14B to let Emily know that he would be cleaning the hallways and that she might hear vacuum cleaner noise. However, when he knocked, there was no response. Assuming that Emily had left and forgotten to turn off the lights, Chen used his master key to enter the classroom. What he found would haunt him for the rest of his life. The classroom appeared normal at first glance. Papers were neatly arranged on Emily's desk, and colorful paper leaves were scattered on a work table where she had apparently been preparing her bulletin board display. However, Emily herself was nowhere to be seen. Her purse was still hanging on the back of her desk, chair, and her car keys were lying on the desk next to her gradebook. Everything looked like Emily had just stepped out for a moment, Chen recalls, his voice shaking even decades later. Her coffee mug was still warm, and there were papers scattered on the table like she had been in the middle of working on something. But Emily was gone, and her purse and keys were still there. I knew immediately that something was very wrong. Chen immediately searched the building, checking every classroom, the gymnasium, the cafeteria, and all storage areas. He called out Emily's name repeatedly but received no response. Growing increasingly worried, he called Principal Thompson at home at 7:45 p.m. to report that Emily appeared to be missing from the school. Principal Thompson arrived at Roosevelt Elementary within 20 minutes, accompanied by her husband. Together they conducted another thorough search of the building, including areas that Chen might have missed. They checked the basement, the attic storage areas, and even the small spaces where someone might hide or become trapped. Emily was nowhere to be found. At 8:30 p.m., exactly 5.5 hours after Emily had last been seen by her colleagues, Principal Thompson called the Cedar Falls Police Department to report that one of her teachers was missing under suspicious circumstances. The fact that Emily's purse and keys had been left behind, combined with her reliable character and strong sense of responsibility, made it clear that her absence was involuntary. Officer James Bradley was the first to respond to the scene. In 1991, missing adult cases were often not treated with immediate urgency, but the circumstances of Emily's disappearance, particularly the fact that she had vanished from her workplace with her personal belongings left behind, warranted immediate investigation. The scene was definitely unusual, Officer Bradley, now retired, explains. You had a responsible adult who had simply vanished from a secure building, leaving behind her purse, keys, and car. There were no signs of struggle in the classroom, but the fact that she had left all her belongings behind suggested that her departure had been sudden and unplanned. The initial investigation focused on the most logical possibilities. Had Emily suffered some kind of medical emergency that had caused her to become disoriented? Police and volunteers searched the area around the school, including nearby parks, wooded areas, and the Cedar River that ran through the town. However, no trace of Emily was found. Had Emily left the school voluntarily with someone she knew? Investigators interviewed all of Emily's colleagues, family members, and friends, but everyone insisted that Emily would never leave her responsibilities without explanation. Moreover, her car was still in the school parking lot, and there was no indication that she had arranged to meet anyone. The investigation expanded to include a detailed examination of Emily's personal life. Detectives interviewed her family, reviewing her financial records, phone calls, and recent activities. They found no evidence of depression, financial problems, or personal conflicts that might have motivated Emily to disappear voluntarily. Emily was one of the most stable, responsible people I had ever known, explains Detective Linda Harrison, who was assigned to lead the investigation. She had no history of erratic behavior, no financial or legal problems, and no enemies that anyone could identify. Her disappearance made absolutely no sense. The case attracted significant media attention throughout Iowa and the surrounding region. Emily's photograph appeared on local television news broadcasts and in newspapers across the Midwest. The story of a beloved elementary school teacher who had vanished without a trace captured public attention and generated hundreds of tips from people who thought they might have seen her. Every tip was investigated thoroughly, but none provided any real leads about Emily's whereabouts. Some callers reported seeing a woman matching Emily's description at gas stations, restaurants, or shopping centers, but none of these sightings could be confirmed. Other tips suggested various theories about what might have happened to her, ranging from abduction to amnesia to voluntary disappearance, but none were supported by evidence. As days turned into weeks, the investigation began to focus more heavily on the possibility that Emily had been the victim of foul play. The fact that she had vanished from inside the school building with no witnesses and no signs of struggle suggested that whoever was responsible had either surprised her or had gained her trust sufficiently to get close to her. "We started looking at anyone who had access to the school building," Detective Harrison explains. That included not just teachers and staff, but also maintenance workers, delivery personnel, and anyone else who might have had keys or legitimate reasons to be in the building after hours. The investigation revealed that several people had access to Roosevelt Elementary after normal school hours. In addition to the evening custodial staff, there were maintenance contractors, security personnel, and district administrators who possessed keys to the building. Each person with access was interviewed and asked to account for their whereabouts on September 18th. The custodial staff came under particular scrutiny, given that they were the only people regularly present in the building during evening hours. However, Robert Chen had a solid alibi for the time period when Emily disappeared. He had been seen by neighbors arriving home from his previous job and had spoken with his wife on the phone before leaving for Roosevelt Elementary. As autumn turned into winter, the active search efforts were scaled back due to weather conditions and the lack of viable leads. Emily Rodriguez had simply vanished, leaving behind a classroom full of confused third graders, a devastated family, and a community struggling to understand how someone could disappear without a trace from what should have been a safe environment. The impact on Roosevelt Elementary was profound. Students struggled to understand why their beloved Miss Rodriguez hadn't returned to finish teaching them about the changing seasons. Parents questioned the security of the school, and several families transferred their children to other elementary schools. The atmosphere of the building, once filled with the warmth and enthusiasm that Emily had brought to her work, seemed permanently altered by her absence. Room 14. B remained empty for the rest of the 1991-1992 school year, as no substitute teacher wanted to take over Emily's classroom under such tragic circumstances. When the room was finally used again the following year, it was reassigned to a different grade level, as if the building itself was trying to forget what had happened there. The mystery of Emily Rodriguez's disappearance would remain unsolved for the next 15 years, becoming one of Cedar Falls' most enduring missing person cases. But the evidence of what had happened to her was waiting patiently, hidden in the very walls of the classroom where she had spent so many happy hours teaching children about the world around them. For 15 years, the disappearance of Emily Rodriguez haunted Cedar Falls, Iowa, in ways both profound and subtle. What had happened to the beloved third-grade teacher became a defining mystery for a community that had never experienced anything so shocking and inexplicable. The case cast a shadow over Roosevelt Elementary School that would persist until the building's eventual closure, and the ripple effects of that September night in 1991 continued to shape lives and families for years to come. Emily's students, who had been 8 and 9 years old when she vanished, grew up carrying questions that no adult could answer. Many of them never forgot their teacher's kindness and enthusiasm, and some were inspired by her memory to pursue careers in education themselves. Others struggled with feelings of abandonment and confusion, wondering why Miss Rodriguez had left them without saying goodbye. "I used to think that maybe I had done something wrong, that maybe Miss Rodriguez left because our class was too noisy or we hadn't been good." Students, recalls Jennifer Hayes, who was in Emily's class in 1991 and is now a mother of 3. It took years of therapy as an adult to understand that children often blame themselves for things that are completely beyond their control. Emily's family never stopped searching for answers. Her parents, Maria and Carlos Rodriguez, spent their life savings hiring private investigators and following leads that police couldn't pursue due to limited resources. They organized annual memorial services at St. Catherine's Church, where community members gathered to remember Emily and pray for her safe return. As the years passed and hope of finding her alive diminished, the services became more focused on keeping her memory alive and supporting other families dealing with missing loved ones. "We never gave up hope that someday we would learn what happened to our daughter," explains Carmen Rodriguez Martinez, Emily's sister. "Every phone call, every knock at the door, we wondered if this would be the moment we would finally get answers. It was exhausting and heartbreaking, but we couldn't stop believing that the truth would eventually come to light." The case officially became cold in 1996, 5 years after Emily's disappearance, when the active investigation was suspended due to lack of leads. The file was transferred to the Iowa Division of Criminal Investigation's Cold Case Unit, where it joined hundreds of other unsolved mysteries from across the state. Detective Linda Harrison, who had worked the case from the beginning, retired in 2001, still haunted by her inability to solve Emily's disappearance. "Emily Rodriguez was the case that got away," Detective Harrison explains. "I interviewed hundreds of people, followed up on countless tips, and examined every piece of evidence we could find. But without witnesses, physical evidence, or any clear indication of what had happened to her, the case eventually went cold. It was the most frustrating experience of my career." Roosevelt Elementary School struggled with Emily's legacy in complex ways. While her memory was honored through scholarships and memorial programs, the building itself seemed to carry the weight of the unsolved mystery. Room 14B, where Emily had taught for 12 years, was never quite the same. Teachers who were assigned to the classroom reported feeling uncomfortable there, and some students claimed the room felt sad or scary. Over the years, various theories emerged about what might have happened to Emily. Some investigators believed she had been the victim of a stranger abduction, possibly by someone who had observed her routine and waited for the right opportunity. Others theorized that she might have been targeted by someone she knew, someone who had gained her trust and used it against her. The most persistent theory involved the possibility that Emily had discovered something she shouldn't have seen, or had inadvertently become involved in a situation that put her in danger. Cedar Falls, despite its reputation as a safe college town, was not immune to the drug-related crime that had begun to affect small communities throughout Iowa in the early 1990s. "We investigated every angle we could think of," recalls Sheriff Robert Martinez, who coordinated regional law enforcement efforts in the case. "We looked into whether Emily might have witnessed criminal activity, whether she might have been targeted by someone with a grudge against teachers or the school system, whether her disappearance might have been connected to other crimes in the area, but we never found evidence to support any particular theory." The advent of DNA testing and improved forensic techniques in the late 1990s and early 2000s brought renewed hope that Emily's case might finally be solved. However, without physical evidence or a crime scene to analyze, the new technologies were of limited help. The few items that had been collected from Emily's classroom, her coffee mug, some papers from her desk, had been handled by so many people that any potential evidence had been compromised. Emily's case received periodic attention from regional and national media outlets, particularly on anniversaries of her disappearance. In 1996, 5 years after she vanished, the Des Moines Register ran a feature story about Iowa's unsolved missing person cases that brought renewed attention to Emily's story. The article generated dozens of new tips, but none led to any breakthrough in the investigation. In 2001, 10 years after Emily's disappearance, her case was featured on the television show Unsolved Mysteries, which brought national attention to the case and generated hundreds of tips from across the country. While none of these tips resulted in finding Emily or solving the case, they helped keep her story in the public consciousness and demonstrated that people across the nation cared about finding answers for her family. Roosevelt Elementary School closed in 2003 due to declining enrollment and budget constraints. The building, which had opened in 1952 and had educated thousands of children over its 51-year history, was deemed too expensive to maintain and upgrade to meet modern educational standards. The closure was emotional for the entire community, but particularly painful for those who remembered Emily Rodriguez and the tragedy that had occurred within its walls. After the school closed, the building sat empty for 3 years while the Cedar Falls School District debated what to do with the property. Various proposals were considered, including conversion to senior housing, demolition for a park, and sale to a private developer. The building's association with Emily's disappearance made it difficult to find buyers or alternative uses, and by 2006, the decision was made to demolish the structure and sell the land. It was this decision that would finally bring closure to Emily Rodriguez's case, though in a way that no one could have predicted. As preparations began for demolition, the school district hired Frank Morrison, a veteran custodian who had worked in various district buildings for over 20 years, to conduct a final cleanup of Roosevelt Elementary before it was torn down. Frank had actually worked at Roosevelt Elementary briefly in the mid-1990s, several years after Emily's disappearance, and had always felt uncomfortable in room 14B. Like others who had worked in that classroom, he sensed something unsettling about the space, though he couldn't explain exactly what bothered him about it. "There was just something about that room that felt wrong," Frank explains. "It wasn't anything I could put my finger on. It just felt different from the other classrooms. Colder somehow, even when the heat was working fine. I always hurried through my cleaning there and tried not to spend more time than necessary." On November 15, 2006, exactly 15 years and 2 months after Emily Rodriguez had disappeared, Frank Morrison entered room 14B for the last time. He was conducting a final inspection of the classroom, checking for any items that might need to be removed or properly disposed of before the demolition crew arrived. The room had been stripped of furniture and equipment, leaving only the basic structure of walls, floors, and built-in features. As Frank examined the baseboards along the walls, looking for any damage that might need to be noted in his final report, he noticed that one section near the back corner of the room seemed loose. The baseboard appeared to have shifted slightly over the years, creating a small gap between the wood and the wall. When Frank knelt down to investigate, he could see that there was a space behind the baseboard, possibly created when the room had been renovated years earlier. Using his flashlight and a screwdriver from his tool kit, Frank carefully removed the loose section of baseboard. What he discovered in the hidden space would finally answer the questions that had haunted Cedar Falls for 15 years and solve one of Iowa's most enduring missing person cases. Frank Morrison's hands trembled as his flashlight beam illuminated the contents of the hidden space behind the baseboard. Carefully concealed in the gap between the wall and the back of the wooden trim were several items that clearly didn't belong in the construction of a 1950s elementary school building. Most significantly, there were pieces of jewelry that Frank immediately recognized from the missing person flyers that had been posted throughout Cedar Falls for years after Emily Rodriguez's disappearance. "I saw Emily's watch first," Frank recalls, his voice still shaken by the memory 15 years later. "It was a small silver watch with a distinctive band that had been described in all the missing person reports. Then I saw her classroom keys, still attached to the apple-shaped keychain that her students had given her for Teacher Appreciation Day." Along with Emily's personal belongings, the hidden space contained items that painted a chilling picture of what had happened on that September night in 1991. There were torn pieces of fabric that appeared to match the blue dress Emily had been wearing on the day she disappeared, along with what looked like dried bloodstains on some of the material. Most disturbing of all, there was a handwritten note that would finally reveal the identity of Emily's killer. Frank immediately stopped his investigation and called the Cedar Falls Police Department. Within minutes, the abandoned Roosevelt Elementary building was swarming with investigators, forensic specialists, and personnel from the Iowa Division of Criminal Investigation. Detective Sarah Wilson, who had inherited Emily's cold case when she joined the DCI in 2005, arrived at the scene within an hour. "After 15 years, we finally had physical evidence," Detective Wilson explains. "The items in that hidden space had been preserved by the dry conditions inside the wall cavity. We were able to recover DNA evidence, fingerprints, and other forensic material that would have been impossible to preserve if these items had been left exposed to the elements." The handwritten note found with Emily's belongings contained a confession that solved the mystery of her disappearance, but also revealed a truth more shocking than anyone had imagined. The note, written in the distinctive handwriting of Roosevelt Elementary's former evening custodian Robert Chen, detailed how he had killed Emily Rodriguez and concealed evidence of his crime. According to the confession, Chen had developed an obsession with Emily over the months leading up to her disappearance. He had used his access to the school building to observe her, working late in her classroom, and had convinced himself that she was interested in him romantically. When he approached her after the faculty meeting on September 18, 1991, and Emily rejected his advances, Chen had become violent. Chen's note described how he had struck Emily with a cleaning tool, causing fatal injuries, Detective Wilson explains. He then panicked and tried to cover up what he had done. He removed Emily's body from the building that night, disposing of it in a location that he never revealed in his confession. But he kept her personal belongings as trophies, hiding them in the wall of her own classroom. The confession explained several mysteries that had puzzled investigators for years. Chen had been able to commit the crime and remove Emily's body without detection because he knew the building's security systems and had legitimate reasons to be working there late at night. He had hidden the evidence in room 14B as a twisted way of keeping Emily close to him, visiting the concealed items whenever he cleaned the classroom in subsequent years. The discovery of Chen's confession note raised immediate questions about why he had written it and hidden it with Emily's belongings. The answer came when investigators learned that Robert Chen had died of a heart attack in 2004, 12 years after Emily's disappearance. The note was apparently written shortly before his death, when Chen was facing his own mortality and was struggling with guilt over what he had done. Chen's confession note was dated just 3 weeks before his death, Detective Wilson explains. It appears that he knew he was dying and finally felt compelled to admit what he had done, but he couldn't bring himself to reveal the location where he had disposed of Emily's body. Instead, he hid the confession with her belongings, perhaps hoping that someday someone would find it. The forensic analysis of the items found behind the baseboard confirmed the details of Chen's confession. DNA evidence extracted from the blood-stained fabric matched Emily's genetic profile, which had been established using samples from her family members. Fingerprints on Emily's watch and keys matched Chen's prints, which were on file from his employment background check. More importantly, the forensic examination revealed trace evidence that helped narrow the search for Emily's body. Soil samples found on Emily's belongings contained distinctive minerals and plant matter that were consistent with areas near the Cedar River, where Chen had often been seen fishing during his off hours. The news of Chen's confession and the discovery of evidence in Emily's former classroom brought national media attention to Cedar Falls. The story of a cold case solved 15 years later through the chance discovery of a janitor preparing a building for demolition captured public imagination and brought renewed focus to the importance of preserving crime scenes and never giving up on unsolved cases. For Emily's family, the discovery provided the answers they had been seeking for 15 years, but also brought a mixture of relief and renewed grief. Finally knowing what had happened to Emily allowed them to begin a different kind of healing process, though the knowledge that her killer had died years earlier meant that there would never be a trial or traditional sense of justice. Learning the truth about what happened to Emily was both a blessing and a curse, Carmen Rodriguez Martinez explains. We finally knew that she hadn't suffered for years, that she hadn't been held captive somewhere. But knowing that the man who killed her had continued living his life for 13 more years while we suffered with uncertainty was incredibly painful. The discovery of Chen's confession also revealed the devastating irony that Emily's killer had continued working at Roosevelt Elementary for several more years after her disappearance, cleaning the very classroom where he had hidden evidence of his crime. Chen had been interviewed multiple times during the original investigation, but his position as custodian had given him a plausible reason to be in the building, and investigators had found no evidence linking him to Emily's disappearance. Based on the information in Chen's confession and the forensic evidence recovered from Emily's belongings, investigators conducted an extensive search of areas near the Cedar River where Chen was known to have spent time. Using ground-penetrating radar, cadaver dogs, and metal detectors, teams searched several locations over a period of months. In March 2007, nearly 16 years after Emily Rodriguez disappeared, search teams finally located her remains in a wooded area approximately 5 miles from Roosevelt Elementary School. The location matched descriptions in Chen's confession, and forensic analysis confirmed that the remains belonged to Emily. She had finally been found, and her family could lay her to rest. On September 18, 2007, exactly 16 years after Emily Rodriguez disappeared from room 14B, her family and the Cedar Falls community gathered for a memorial service that celebrated her life and mourned her death. The service was held at St. Catherine's Catholic Church, where Emily had been an active member, and where her family had held annual memorial services throughout the years of uncertainty. The case of Emily Rodriguez became a powerful example of how persistence, thorough investigation, and sometimes pure chance can combine to solve even the coldest cases. Frank Morrison, the janitor whose final cleanup led to the discovery of Emily's belongings, was honored by the Iowa Attorney General for his role in solving the case. Emily's story also highlighted the importance of maintaining crime scenes and preserving evidence, even when cases seem hopeless. The items that Robert Chen had hidden behind the baseboard of room 14B had remained undisturbed for 15 years, waiting for the right person to find them at the right time. Today, a memorial garden marks the site where Roosevelt Elementary School once stood. The garden, maintained by volunteers from the Cedar Falls education community, blooms each September with flowers that Emily loved, ensuring that her memory continues to bring beauty to the place where she had dedicated her life to teaching children. The Emily Rodriguez Memorial Scholarship, established by the Cedar Falls School District, provides funding for future teachers who demonstrate the same passion for education and commitment to students that Emily had shown throughout her career. Recipients of the scholarship are chosen not just for their academic achievements, but for their dedication to making a difference in the lives of children. Emily Rodriguez may have been taken from her students and family on that September night in 1991, but her legacy of caring, dedication, and love for learning continues to inspire new generations of educators. Her story serves as a reminder that behind every cold case is a real person with a real family who deserves answers, and that those answers are sometimes hidden in the most unexpected places, waiting patiently for their moment to come to light.